There we go. All right, welcome everyone. So thank you for sticking around for my presentation. I know it's not going to be as exciting as picking up a hitchhiker, going around the earth, or learning all the wonderful new things in FreeFlyer and Meridian. But this is one I'm very passionate about. It's project management, and it's helping your team with understanding kind of, Scrum, Kanban, Waterfall, making sense of all those type of terms. So let's get started. Who am I and why should you care what I have to say? Background is communication sociology, programming as well. I've been a software developer and project manager for 16 plus years now. Have a project management certification. I took that horrible test and I highly recommend it for anyone in the project management field. I consider myself an Agile Evangelist and philosopher. With that, I wrote a new book on that very topic, Is That Agile? And it goes through some of the things we're talking about today, but more, tickets and testing and everything a development team needs to do better. So shameless plug, that's available on Amazon and Kindle. So I guess the first off question, why should you care about a framework? Why are you sitting here listening to me today? The easy answer is if you're dealing with code in any way, shape, or form, or a ticketing system, right? If you're doing software development, system administration, analysts, testing, if you have Jira tickets, Asana, Trello tickets, if you're being requested to do work within a certain deadline, this frameworks will help you get all that, be more efficient in your work. Or if you're not on those type of teams, are you ancillary to one of those teams? Because if you're having to deal with a team that does, write code or have to deal with a ticketing system, then knowing what they're doing and how they're working can help you help them and work with them. So I myself work on a flight software code as well as a ground system team. But anything again that has analysis work or complex pre-missions. So just to back up a little bit and set everyone on the same baseline. You've heard me say Agile a couple of times. You will hear it throughout the presentation. This comes up in every talk on project management. And so, setting the framework or the groundwork for what Agile is. First off, it's not necessary for this presentation. All the stuff we're talking about is kind of a level below what Agile is. But, in a synopsis, Agile is a framework built around what they've made as the Agile Manifesto and 12 principles to help project managers try to find a lightweight, adaptive strategy for work. I consider it to be a philosophy, something as a philosophy, it colors or flavors the world, not necessarily strict rules to live by. So one of the creators of Agile, I think, said it best as a set of values based on trust and respect for each other, promoting organizational models, which is what frameworks are, based on people, collaboration, building the type of organizational communities in which we want to work. So with that out of the way, what's a framework? So a framework can be thought of as the initial methodology or scaffolding for your team. I like this picture of what I call the Agile pizza. If you look at, software development processes and project management as a pizza, you have the crust, all those, software practices, test and development, things like that. The middle gooey layer of sauce, which is what my book is on, your methodology, which is what we'll be talking about today, as the cheese that kind of holds everything together. And then again, the philosophies of Agile just sprinkled on. It helps you manage your workflow, your rituals, customer interactions, the metrics that you use to know if you're actually doing things correctly. Sometimes they're based on philosophies, sometimes they're not. And the most common ones you either have heard or you will hear often: Waterfall, Scrum, Kanban. To a lesser extent, extreme programming, feature-driven development, tongue twister, safe and less. We will be going over the top 3 today, just to give you an understanding of what to look for and how to look at the pros and cons. So, you know what a framework is, at least up a high level, what can it do for you? Well, having that scaffolding, having that set of thing to hold everything, the cheese to hold everything together, it helps predictability. Your team knows what to expect. Every Monday they'll have this thing. And when I say rituals, you'll hear me say that often. I mean meetings, the standard, we're doing this at this time for this reason. It gives the solutions. A lot of frameworks were made to solve particular issues, especially with software teams. And this gives, how do you solve that in a nice, easy package? You don't have to go running and reading 1,000 books to try to figure out what's going on. Training, again, with everything being predictable, you can bring a new person on the team, you can give them, here's how Scrum works, go read. And they should be up to speed on what your team is doing. It's very easy. So starting to go through the 3 big ones, we'll start with everyone's favorite foe, Waterfall. This is one, either project manager, love it or you hate it. I'm one of the few, again, I like every methodology is useful somewhere. Waterfall is great. It's great when you're building a bridge, great when you're building a house. Software, not so much. So this is a predictive methodology, meaning that we try to plan out everything that could possibly go wrong. And once we plan all that out, then we start to work. And you don't do any work that hasn't been planned. Again, the predicting everything that could go wrong. If you're building a house, for example, it's kind of like actuarial work, right? What is the chance, what's the probability a meteorite could hit your work site? Very low. What impact could the meteorite have if it hit your work site? Very high. So does that mean you have to make contingency plans for that one? Or can you just throw it to the side? You try to find all the risks that you can and sort them out. Some people in the past have broken that down. Department of Defense and Navy were the 2 big ones. They said, okay, trying to plan out everything all at once doesn't work. So let's just plan out parts of it at a time. And that's how you got iterative project management styles. That's often called rolling wave planning. And again, the best way to think about this is a house with blueprints, right? If the change is supposed to be hard. So if you start building the foundation and you're like, oh, I want to add an extra bathroom over there, you're going to have to replan a lot of things. You're going to have to pour more cement if you're doing a slab, or build out if it's on the upper level, on second level, and things like that. So, and that's where we get to kind of the pros and cons of Waterfall itself. It's very structured, very stable, good for building large physical things. A lot of spacecrafts are done as Waterfall. With rolling wave planning, you kind of get some of the breakdowns of Waterfall, kind of get swept under the rug because you can just plan for those immediate parts with a master plan often to roll those up. And all the problems, as I mentioned before, are well researched, right? It may be a very low probability a meteorite's going to hit your house, but you've already set money aside just in case it does. And that means everything you've planned for can be efficiently dealt with, whether it's just oh yeah, we put money in contingency fund, or no, you're not allowed to add another room, sorry. And as well, the metrics for Waterfall projects are very well established. It's kind of the bread and butter of project management, those metrics, the EAC and whatnot. The cons for Waterfall, the downsides, are pretty large, at least in my hemisphere. In software development, you can't plan out time very well, right? You can say, oh yeah, this code will take me a day to make. You get into the existing code base and you find, oh, nothing's there. It'll actually take me 2 weeks to make because I have to build out everything underneath it. Unplanned problems or changes, right? The customer says, again, oh, I want this new house, or I want this new web page or whatnot. Those aren't easily included. They're supposed to be hard to change. And so if you don't change them correctly, it costs a lot, especially later in the project. And finally, front loading, all that planning it does cost you time to market. It's, if you want to be nimble, especially in software development, you want to be nimble and understand how you need to change things as new problems arise or new integrations develop. And if change is hard, if change is supposed to be costly, that change doesn't work very well. So after that, back in 95, a new methodology was proposed, Scrum. This one is the top of the market right now. Many teams, I think it has almost 50% market share of software and development projects. So many teams you'll be working on or work with are likely to have at least looked at Scrum if they're not already running it. It's an iterative project management, which means, again, it goes through cycles of planning and work. This is the one, as I mentioned before, why I had to say about Agile. A lot of people confuse Scrum to be Agile. It is not. That's one of the things I fight against the most in any of these presentations. Scrum is not Agile. Scrum was developed 6-7 years before Agile, and it can be perfectly run with a waterfall philosophy, with a very predictive philosophy. The main features of Scrum is the daily Scrum or stand-up, and its cycles, so normally called sprints. These give a good time box. The sprints give a good time box of, you're supposed to get all this done in this time. If you fail that, then you have to go figure out what went wrong. How did you all, it gives a little anxiety, a little stressor, just to help push the team along. And Scrums is basically a daily check-in to see how everyone works. So this one I split out the pros and cons on 2 pages because, again, this one gets a little bit more talking points because it is the most popular one out there right now. So pros, as I mentioned, that urgency, that some people need those stressors to get things done. In project management, it's called the Parkinson's law of, work expands to fill the time allotted for it. So if you give someone a month to do some work, it will take a month. So sprints help kind of push that in a bit. Daily Scrums, again, opportunity for the team to say what they did yesterday, what they're doing today, what their blockers are. Very easy. Work estimates are very high level. You're not giving down hours. You're giving down, it looks like a large effort. It looks like a medium effort. A lot of people use the Fibonacci series. They use 1, 3, 5, 8, 11, 13, 20, sort of the Fibonacci series. But yeah, it's, is this a 20 effort? Well, that's huge. We're only allowed to put, 30 points into our sprint. We can't put an entire 20-pointer in. So it gives everybody kind of a working definition of how big things are. And it gives great metrics for the team. Mostly velocity. We got 100 points last sprint. The sprint afterwards, we got 50 points. What happened? Why did we decrease our work product by half? Let's look at that. And that's actually the last pro on here is the part of Scrum is that you need to do those mandatory reviews of what happened and why it happened. You're supposed to continue to learn from your mistakes and tweak things and fix things. So on the other side, those sprints I mentioned that were great time boxes to help stress people and get them pushed and move along. If there's no consequences for failing, then you lose all that benefit, right? So say, oh, we were supposed to do 100 points this sprint. We ended up doing 80. Oh, well, we'll just move the 20 to the next sprint. Whatever. You lose all that good anxiety about it. Daily Scrums, again, they're great for people to communicate what they're doing, but we live in the era of communication. Why are not people talking to each other, especially on Slack, Discord, Teams, whatever, right? Why are we not, if a problem comes up, tell me immediately. Don't wait till tomorrow's Scrum meeting. Those estimates I mentioned, management tries to confuse them a lot for time estimates, right? So you say, oh, this is going to be a large effort, or it'll take 13 points. Oh, so 13 hours to get it done? No, I didn't say that. It's a large effort. So how large? Give me time. What? Okay, I'll give you 3 days. Doesn't work like that. Please resist that if you're ever on a Scrum team. Estimations are not time. Going back to the team metrics, wonderful for the team to figure out what they're doing wrong. Horrible for other people to know what's doing wrong. Again, back to that management. If your team says this effort's worth a 3, what does a 3 mean? Your team knows. Another team, their 3 may be a whole different worth. Management may say 3 hours. Okay. So those metrics are all internal to the team. And it's a little bit harder to get those metrics correct for outside people. Not impossible, just harder and more customer training. Some teams like to, make their sprints longer to get more done. Some teams like to have a full release at the end of each sprint, which is great until they make the sprints 3 months long. Again, those, time boxing kind of loses its meaning when you stretch it out that long. As well, when you have those longer sprints, if you want, in a sprint, work is not supposed to be added. You set what's going to be done at the start of the sprint, and you do that work and only that work. So if you're on, for example, a system admin team and an emergency comes up, or on an analysis team and your customer, oh, we need this new analysis right away. Well, it's not in the Scrum, so it's going to have to wait. And if your Scrum's 3 months long, then it's going to have to wait not till the end of this sprint, but for the end of the next sprint for it to be delivered. So that's up to 6 months. The customer could be waiting for an item they want right now. Or you break your Scrum, or you break your sprint, which is also problematic. You're not supposed to be doing that. What's the point of having sprints if you can break them that easily? And then those cycles, sprint after sprint after sprint, are often stopped and broken for other activities like architecture or testing or things like that. So the cadence of Scrum isn't that nice loop as you see here in the picture. It's often a loop and then stopped, and then another loop and then stopped. So next up, after that, it's gaining in popularity. One of my favorite ones, just to put my cards on the table, is the Kanban. This is what I was originally taught when I got into project management, and it's an interesting style. And I'm going to try to explain some of the core mechanics of it, but it's one of those you kind of have to read up more on to fully get. It's a lean style, which is adaptive like Agile. It's thought of from the just-in-time manufacturing, right? It originally came from a Japanese garden where people, to get in the garden, you can stay in the garden as long as you want, but to get in, you're given a ticket, a little plaque. When you leave, you give up that little ticket. And so if they have, 20 tickets, meaning 20 people can go into the garden that day, they'll give out 20 tickets, and then no more people are allowed in. Once another ticket comes back, they give it to the next person. That person goes in. So it's a great way to limit workflow and limit volume of work. And that's kind of what it was trying to solve. The idea was by limiting how much work we take on, we can get that work done faster. One of the core concepts of Kanban is that work is pulled in. It's not pushed, but pulled in. So for example, as a developer, I write my code, I make my ticket, gets through PR, and I say, okay, now it needs to be tested. Instead of handing it to a tester, I hold on to it until a tester is ready to take it from me. It's a subtle change, but it's worth understanding a little bit better. That change means that I can't proceed to my next work until what's on my plate is pulled off it. So if I'm just sitting there with nothing to do because the testers are all blocked in what they're doing, do I just sit there like a bump on a log, or do I go help the testers? The answer is you go help the testers. You know, and it's a great way to say, okay, where's the traffic jam? Let's all swarm. Anyone who is waiting to give their stuff off, let's all swarm the blockage and fix that. And that does get into some of the pros for Kanban. First off, unlike Scrum, new or critical work can easily be fit in, right? You just work on it next. It gets to the top of the list and goes through. As I mentioned before, teams are focusing on blockers, right? If I know the test team can't get done with all their testing, and I'm sitting here waiting for them to take my item, I can go help them. Because you have that prioritized backlog, that you can only work on one thing at a time, it does help customers focus on what their absolute critical first need is. If they may want 5 things, they get 1. Which one next? A lot of customers aren't very happy with that, but they learn the benefits of that, because it's okay, what one do you want the most? It makes them decide. It makes them really figure out their own deadlines and their own needs. And they do eventually appreciate that. You do have a higher velocity of work most times because you're pulling work through. So, you know, only working on one thing, the entire team swarms that one thing. It gets in, it gets out, it gets delivered. Some of the downsides of Kanban, I mentioned, you know, I'm a developer, I finish my stuff, test team needs help, I go help them. A lot of times in testing, that doesn't work the other way around, right? If a tester's sitting around waiting for something to do, they can't come over and help code. You know, I'm, as a software developer, I'm not an aerospace person. You know, I can't get on and help, you know, an aerospace person with their tickets. They kind of need to do that work because I have no idea what's going on with the math. It's just way over my head. So the teams work best when they're not specialists, when they can jump in and out of each other's roles, at least to a degree. Again, with Scrum, you had the time box that can add that pressure. Kanban doesn't have that. So you do need to pay more attention to, okay, how long have you had your ticket? How long have you been lingering on this? Are you fixing it and just taking a long time, or are you, really needling at the finer points that you don't need to be doing? Or worse, gold plating. It doesn't deal with expanding efforts. So what I mean by expanding efforts, say you have your customer asks for a simple feature, what you think is a simple feature. But that simple feature, say a new web page on a web app, but that requires a new database or a new other tool to be integrated in, or some extra architecture in the background, or new servers or something that expands out the work. Kanban doesn't really deal with that very well. So you need to figure out all that before it goes into the system. And then again, release schedules are more nebulous, right? You don't have that time box. Here's when we end, here's when you release type thing. So those type of uncertainties, those type of kind of nebulous things do tend to worry customers a little bit more. So you got to look out for that. So we've done the top 3. There's actually one more I want to go over, and this one is special. Tailoring. This is either creating your own or taking an existing one and meshing parts of it together. I've heard things called like Scrumfall, when they tried to mesh Scrum and Waterfall together. Not most of what I recommend, but at least Scrumfall is not what I recommend. The example I'm using here, feature focused, I created for my team. We were having a problem on architecting, as I mentioned, breaking those tickets out on everything that's needed. Now, I work on a team that has a lot of non-aerospace engineers on it, working on an aerospace task. We kind of need to understand all the math. It all needs to be written down to what the customer wants before we can implement it. We can implement it easily. We just need to understand it. So we focused on that feature architecture, which you see here in the blue line, breaking everything down and then moving the technical work through, then putting everything back together and testing. So building your own framework, tailoring it to what you need is great because it gives your customers, your team members that custom feel, or solves those special problems that your team and maybe your team alone are having. So with this one, again, I started with the lean philosophy, started with Kanban as a jumping off point, and really started messing with how do we know what work is in the pipeline. So pros and cons just for everything else. Pro, it helps, since the team makes it, they can adapt to it a lot quicker, right? You're solving their problems, they know what they need to do, which is great. You can target those biggest problems. If you're having a real difficult time delivering, right? What is causing that delivery problem? Let's make a framework around that. And again, custom metrics means better involvement from the customer. They get what they want. They get it, not just metrics how they want it, but tailored so that they can then disseminate it to their people, mostly managers up above and whatnot. Downsides, again, all of these, nothing's ever perfect. There's a huge temptation to just abandon everything, right? What's the difference between a custom tailored process and no process at all? It's very blurry line, because at some point you may just stop updating your process and just do as you wish. It's not for novice project managers or teams. I do recommend having a project manager on either staff or in retainer to help understand, okay, well, you're trying to do this, but is that really your problem? Or what have you thought of this thing? Really give feedback on your tailoring. And again, there's greater chance for things to go wrong, because especially if, for example, your biggest problem that you're trying to solve with this tailor, what if it wasn't your biggest problem? You've just made a new or tailored a system that doesn't actually solve your issues. And then upper management, which is almost always a problem on these type of things. They can look at this and say, this is chaos. You're actually not following a process. You don't know, your team doesn't know what you're doing. Why isn't your team having, Bob's team over there is using Scrum. They're working just fine. Why can't you use Scrum like them? So it does take some more management training, some more assurances from upper management. And, sometimes they just, at the end of the day, say, nope, Scrum's working for this one team. Everybody use Scrum. No more discussion. And you can't tailor at that point. So, having, just a little bit of the flavors of frameworks out there, which ones do you pick? Which ones do you do? I can't answer that, at least not with a lot of certainty. There's a lot of frameworks out there. Again, I mentioned before, extreme programming, feature-driven development, safe and less. Less, by the way, is large-scale Scrum, so it's in the Scrum family. But it depends on what your team is doing, what your team's trying to solve. So research it, figure out, this is just to make sure you understand what's out there and that you have options. The option of just not having a framework is probably the worst one. So find anything and try it. But again, have an understanding of what your team is trying to do, what you're trying to solve, what your company wants you to do, what your company allows you to work with, and get everything together. On the other hand, if you're a system admin team, use Kanban. So many times I see system admin teams try to use Scrum, and it mentions things I mentioned earlier in slides. It just doesn't work. Start with Kanban and then evolve from there. So when you start with something, when you finally pick out that, or if you're on a team where your lead picked it out, one of the big questions I get is, do I need training? Do I need certification? You can become a Scrum Master or a Kanban practitioner, it's called. Do I need to bring in someone and pay them thousands of dollars to tell us how to do this? Yes and no. No, in that no framework should require it. There are a couple out there that do. They are company-wide big ones. SAFe is probably the biggest example. if you're going safe, your entire company is going safe, and you have no choice in the matter. Your company probably bought a trainer for it. That's okay. Otherwise, Scrum, Kanban, if you want to even do feature focused, those should be laid out with enough information about them. These aren't new, right? People have been writing about them. They're big fans of each of the styles. You can find information on them. You can train yourself. But some of those nuances, which knobs to turn to help adjust things, that is good for a trainer or a good project manager can help you with those. And no matter what framework you choose, I've seen so many teams fall in the pitfall of the J curve. So I have here on this image, as you start your new methodology, you will lose efficiency. You will lose productivity. People are training, people are trying to figure out what to make of all this. You may size your tickets wrong. Your team has to come together on figuring out what sizing means if you're doing Scrum. With Kanban, you may have those people who just sit there like, oh, I still have this item. They need a little nudge. Hey, this is not how Kanban works. Relearn it, please. And all that will happen. But over time, don't despair, don't give up. You will get better. Just sticking to anyone, as long as it fixes the problems you're trying to fix, you will get better once you start getting familiar and learning your framework. So, as well, start with what you know, right? A lot of teams have really huge backlogs of tickets and work that they just haven't gotten to yet, or maybe not ever will get to. It's healthy, it's okay. But you do need to, instead of going back and trying to fix everything into the new methodology right away, again, that's Waterfall, that's planning everything first. Start with what you know. Start with, hey, in the next 2 weeks, we have these features due. Let's fix these tickets and, start as Kanban, right? We'll take these 20 tickets, we'll fix them up in the next 2 weeks, we'll, put these 5 on top, and we'll start running Kanban with these 20 tickets. See how it works, right? Once your team is kind of used to it, once you have more things flowing through correctly, then go back and fix up the old tickets. So I hope this, again, helps people. It's, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not space specific. There's a lot of, again, most everything these days touches software, and how to run a better software project is a problem, half the world is having to deal with. And with some success from people, some not successful. So I'm hoping to try to give you a little bit more of that edge towards success. It gives you, a good framework, gives you those processes, that scaffolding I mentioned, and you will improve, you will get more efficient with them. So just to reiterate, the popular ones, Waterfall, Scrum, and Kanban, you will hear those names throughout the industry. They're very popular, and at least you have some talking points. So when someone says, hey, yeah, we're doing Kanban, you can think, oh, yeah, you pull things and you limit the work. Great. As I mentioned before, negative and positives, everybody has good and bad. Try to understand what it is before you select one. And then finally, this is your team. You're not doing this alone. If you're doing it alone, you really don't need any methodology. But as a team, this helps get everyone coordinated. So take the time to learn it. Take the time to figure out which one you want before starting it, and get everybody on board, right? This should be a team decision. This should be a team understanding. So, and I hope all that helps. Any questions?
All right, thanks so much, Ax. We do have a couple questions from the audience. The first one is going to be kind of a combination of 2 questions. So this one is, what makes the point measurement system superior to a days of effort approach when tracking effort needed for release, and how do you communicate this type of point-based system or this point-based timeline to stakeholders when they want to know what to expect, when to expect results?
Right. So a lot of times in Scrum, it looks at when you're going to release, not necessarily what you're going to release, right? So if your sprints are, say, 4 weeks, or, again, at the end of every sprint, you should have some measure of success. So whether that be a full release and the code's going to production, or it be a demo to your customer, here's how far we got in the sprint. With, here's what we succeeded at, here's what we didn't succeed at. So having that kind of more style, your customer should easily be able to say, okay, you finished the 4 weeks, you gave me a demo what you all did. Yeah, okay, that doesn't, that's not everything I need, so next sprint. And maybe in 2 sprints from now, we'll forecast a little bit, maybe 2 sprints we have it. That's often called horse trading, and it's kind of planning out just roughly what you want in each sprint. Like this sprint, we're going to have these kind of things. Next sprint, we're going to have this batch of things. Sprint after that, those batch of things. That may change, and your customer has to accept that it can. But it does give them a little bit more forecasting ability. Points, though, again, they're not time estimates. You don't want them to be time estimates, because time estimating, especially software, doesn't work. It's the best way I can think of it is more of an artistic endeavor, right? If I'm a bricklayer and I make a wall, right, I can lay 100 bricks a minute, very fast. And so if you want a wall, 5 feet high by 20 feet long, I can tell you exactly how many bricks that is and how long it will take me. You can't do that in software, right? So many things can change the calculations. So you try to avoid the time estimates as much as possible. And then you deliver either, at this time we're delivering these features. Sorry, we're either delivering these features this next release, or we're delivering at this time with whatever features we've gotten done. If your customer can't accept that, that's a conversation for project management and upper management. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. The next one is, so with Kanban, what's your recommendation if you notice that certain items from the backlog are not getting pulled forward? For example, maybe everyone is avoiding having to take on one project that no one wants to do.
If they're not being pulled forward, then they're not your customer's priorities. If it's at the top of the backlog, which means it's supposed to be next to pulled forward, and it's not, then you better have a good decision as to why it didn't pass. This is the, quote, line of commitment. I put it on line of commitments. It's on feature focus. Again, feature focus was built around Kanban. That line of commitment means everything past that line, this is a lean terminology, everything past that line has to be finished. So if it's your top priority for your customer, and see like that yellow story, and it's not being worked on, it has to be a good reason as to why it's not being worked on, right? Either doesn't have enough information, or it requires a specialist who's currently occupied with other things, or whatever, but there needs to be a good reason, because that is your customer's top priority. Just not wanting to work on it doesn't cut it in Kanban.
Okay. So the last one here is, does the size of the team have any effect on which method you would recommend, or is it strictly dependent on what the project is itself?
It's less about the size of the team and more of the makeup of the team. Every team is different. Every team has different personalities. They meshed, differently. Whenever you add or subtract a person from the team, you have to go through all of that adjustment, and it literally creates a new team. So which methodology you use is more based on that team makeup. I've seen Scrum teams with 30 people on it. I've seen Kanban teams with 10. Once you get into hundreds of people, if you're doing Scrum, those daily stand-ups are going to take a while. You may, it's really, when you look at a team is people pulling towards the same goal. If you have 100, say, developers, are they all really working on the same team? Are they doing the same thing, or are they actually sub-teams that are doing different parts? Like, for example, front end versus back end. or database versus REST service, right? If they're not all working on the same team, are they really the same? They're not all working on the same thing. Are they really the same team? So no, team size doesn't matter except when you get into really large numbers. Then you got to think about what your team is.
Cool. Actually, one last question is, what framework or frameworks are you using for your current projects?
Great. So both of my projects I'm currently on are customized. Again, I would say I'm an expert project manager, so I make sure I fix the things that are the problem. Mostly right now, my main task is feature focused. There's a website there where I posted everything I did about it, well, on my blog. And I go through exactly, again, what we were trying to solve. For us, it was the fact that Kanban can't really expand in the middle of working on stuff. So we tried to front load all of that, expand everything with good architecting first, create all these, the technical tickets, as I call them, just the, hey, do this right here. Here's what your output is. Give that to a developer. They can just hammer away at it and send it for testing. And then at the end, everything gets put together and we do our testing on the entire feature, and then it goes into the release package. Once it's in the release package, customer can take a release whenever they want. So I've worked on all of these though. I've done Scrum both as an agile style of Scrum and as a waterfall or predictive style of Scrum. Both the good and the bads of both of those. So